Welcome back to another series of the Make Life Work podcast, Season 6, if you're counting. I am your host, Cy Jobling, side project addict with far too many years to count from working in tech. I'm also a software engineering manager, community advocate, and podcast junkie, so this is the ideal platform for me to share topics important to me. This time on the podcast, I've returned to interview more people from around the tech scene about some of their recent projects, how they fit them around lockdown life, along with their day jobs. By diving into their specific projects, we hope to uncover some of the tips and tricks they use to make them happen, so you lovely listeners can try them out yourself. This week, I've invited along Chris Hellman, Principal Program Manager for Browser Tools at Microsoft, presenter and coding evangelist. Chris and I go quite a long way back to the early days of Web 2.0 when Twitter was available on IRC and before any celebrities joined, and he's always inspired me with his passion for giving back to the community. Chris recently released an online course about optimizing your remote development environment, so I thought invite him along to talk about what the inspiration was, how he went about making it, and any future plans. Time to get into it. This is Making Skillshare Content with Chris Hellman. So welcome along, Chris Hellman. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, welcome. It's good to see you back. We go way back together, don't we?
We have a long history together, I think, don't we?
Yeah.
I think it was about 2007 when we started chatting on the Twitter, and it went from there.
Yeah.
And you managed to get me into Yahoo, which was probably my career highlight.
And you came in every morning from rugby to London and back, and I always thought that was kind of odd, but you hung in there for quite a while. I was quite impressed. Then again, like traveling 1 hour to the outside into London is like traveling the same as 1 hour in London. So
Exactly.
You could be in the same neighborhood. It takes the same time to come in. But if there's any disruption.
Exactly. And that's how I justified it. I spent more time just on a fast train than you guys did on a slow train. So yeah. But yeah, we go back to then, and then you've done all sorts since then. So I'd maybe want to give everyone a bit of a heads up as to what your career has been like for the last 10 years, I guess.
Oh, good. We only do the last 10 years because it's been like this roller coaster ride of all kinds of things.
It, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the big breakthrough for me to a degree was when I moved to England and I worked for an agency there to do like a lot of government work, like Hammersmith and Fulham Council, North Yorkshire Council, these kind of things, and visitbritain.com, the big tourism portal, and also McDonald's.co.uk, these kind of things. So once you had these on your plate, it was much easier to go further. So then I went to Yahoo UK. And when Yahoo UK actually folded, I started working at Mozilla, and I was the lead evangelist there, the principal evangelist. And then when Firefox OS came around, I was on that. And then Microsoft asked me to help them with the rollout of the new browser because they wanted to kill Internet Explorer, which we now finally are very close to. And that's where I wanted to go. So I basically now have been 6 years in Microsoft, and I was 6.5 years, and I was completely shocked by seeing that the other day because it flew past. So now I'm principal program manager for developer tools inside Microsoft, which means the developer tools inside the Edge browser and the interaction with Visual Studio Code. And the fun thing is, coming from an engineering background and going into the evangelism advocacy role and now going back into program management is really, really interesting because I now have like engineering teams, I have program managers to work with, and I have a docs team. I've got all the things to deal with. And in the level that I'm in, I'm asked to do a lot of stuff for the next 5 to 10 year thinking rather than just like releasing something day to day, which is a different thinking for me because I still want to do the things and be in the day-to-day delivery. But it's great to actually get that kind of trust because that's something you don't hear often. That we all get the stupid question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? But getting the mandate to actually plan for the next 5 years what the company should be doing and knowing that you will be supported during that time is kind of humbling. It's kind of impressive.
And you must find that very difficult because I've been in a similar boat recently, like looking at the delivery plan for the next year, give or take. And we all know those plans never stick for more than 6 months, right? So how have you found that shift into forward planning, but being realistic about what you can do?
I think there's two things to it. There's like the blue sky thinking vision document kind of stuff where you're actually thinking where do we want to go, and I think it's very important there to not get bogged down on delivery and like knowing how it's done right now, because technology moves in 5 years a lot as well. So there might be things that are quite easy in 2 years that are impossible to do right now. And for the day-to-day delivery, we are actually doing an agile thing where we actually have now 4 week sprints for every release of the browser. And in those, we actually have two sprints in 1 month, so it's 2 weeks a sprint. And every end of the month sprint is just a bug sprint where we just fix bugs. So that's a great time for me to actually think about the next 2 or 4 sprints and plan ahead. Whereas like the day-to-day delivery is actually cut down into chunkable sizes, and we're actually asked to put up scenarios that can be delivered in that sprint as well. So we don't have these blue sky great ideas on the backlog all the time to be in the way of people. On the backlog, we got things that get delivered, get out of the way, so the next thing can come in. So that is actually really helpful to also see the progression of your product towards where you want to go.
So yeah, I guess that goes back to that 5-year plan. Is like, what is the ultimate goal in the next 5 years that we'll never reach, but at least we've got that sort of idea what's coming down the line.
Yeah, and I mean, it could be just ideas like where do we want development in general to go? Like, what's the role of machine learning for developers? Where we do like facial analysis, we do audio captioning, we do all kind of stuff with that. But for developers, we're always like, here's a command line from 1973, and this is what you guys want, right? And the main thing is like, no, we should be cleverer than that as well by now. And there's a lot of ideas that are coming down in that regard right now. I think it's going to be interesting. There's a change in perception from developers, what I see, that a younger developer nowadays is totally happy to build a product based on 5 things they don't understand. They just use. Whereas like in our case, like, okay, I use these 12 libraries with 15 NPM modules. Where are they coming from? Are they secure? Can I use them? And a lot of this is actually going away. And I think with computing becoming more ubiquitous and technology becoming more obvious and connectivity being much faster everywhere, not only in the Western world, I think we're heading for an interesting market. At the same time, it was shocking to see how many people got caught by surprise by the pandemic. Like moving from England to Germany and seeing how crap Germany is at digitalization of like schools and government initiatives is just absolutely painful to see. I just had my vaccine, for example, and they gave me a printout with a URL this long that I should type in to download a PDF, to print out the PDF, to fill it out by hand, to bring it back to the doctors to get my vaccine shot. And I'm like, why is that not an email? Oh, we can't get an email because, and that's the good thing, we're not allowed to get your email and record it because of security and privacy. And I'm like, that's great, but inconvenience not as good either. Like you could have still give me a QR code, and they're like, a QR what? So what I found interesting in the whole pandemic is like how much we live in a bubble, and we thought that like just before it started, I was really down the machine learning and artificial intelligence path, and I was like, everything will be done for you by your computer in 2 weeks, and then like pandemic started, and we realized like paper printouts are actually the only way that people understand, and there's not enough mobile phones for everybody out there. There's not enough tablets, and schools are woefully understaffed and also under-equipped for like digital experience. I feel bad for all the kids right now that couldn't go to school in the last year because it didn't work the way they actually expected to. And I was always a protagonist of saying like, hey, this is great. Like, let the kids learn at home, do online training, and like, but the social experiment of sitting next to each other in school is super important.
Totally. I mean, I know you've not got children, but I've got 2, and I know firsthand how badly prepared the schools were for what was going to happen, but also what could be done, because every school is slightly different. My 2 kids are at 2 different schools. My wife teaches at a separate one, and to see what my wife managed to enable in the lockdown, she built an online tutoring program with all the virtual mentors. She built an entire system around Teams, and I helped with some of the tech around the back of it as well. But I don't know how Germany compares, because I know a lot of UK schools just don't know how to think like this. It's just they're not prepared for it.
No, they never got trained as well. The teachers don't know how to use the equipment. They don't know how to deal with the privacy and security of it as well. They're just basically overwhelmed. And I think it's also fun for a lot of for a lot of people, they're basically like, yeah, well, we're going to teach our kids at home ourselves. And when I look at school materials, I just realize just how much I've forgotten and how much I have no connection to that. Like I see this math problem and I'm like, I use a computer for that. Why would I ever need this kind of thing? Like nobody buys 50 melons. What's wrong with you? Like it's...
This is very strange. All this kind of leads well into the reason I invited you along, actually, was to talk about your online Skillshare course, about top tools to optimize your workflow as a developer. Can you tell us a bit about what prompted the actual content and, you know, what you're trying to achieve with it?
Well, the thing is, I mean, whenever I work with Skillshare, they always ask me for two courses. They asked me for a long one and a short one. And the short one was this one. So I did a one about accessibility and how to make sure that your product has enough accessibility in it, how to use developer tools to test for accessibility. And then the second one was like, so what else affected your life in the last few months? And I'm like, well, it's the whole changing of the scene that all my engineers are actually working from home right now, and all my other program managers work from home as well. And a lot of them did that for the first time because, I mean, working for a large company with like a huge complex of buildings, they were just used to going to the office and just start and work there. And out of a sudden, they didn't know how to deal with the freedom to be from home, to work from wherever, and they didn't know how to actually make sure that the infrastructure at home is good enough to actually set these same expectations we had from the office. A lot of people also have the problem that the mindset is not there. You go to the office, you start working, and you go home and you're home. Whereas like sitting next to a table next to your bed and still being in work mode is something that is really tough to do. So I became very early on an expert that people asked about this because I've been working from home for 10 years and I'm working on the go all the time, like from hotel rooms and planes. So I got used to that kind of mindset switching and what kind of technology to set up on my machine to make sure that actually is there. So in this course, I'm going through the basics of like, how do you make sure that you're effective as a developer while people are not sitting next to you? Like what's happening if that like a water cooler moment where when somebody just leaves your office and I forgot about this, hang on, actually is not possible. It deals with the idea of like version controlling everything, making sure that everything you do is available somewhere on the cloud for other people as well, and to give them the right access for it. Because if somebody like me works in another time zone and people ask me to collaborate with a product at the end of their day in California, I get it next morning and it says you don't have access to that link. And that means 24 hours are wasted because I cannot work until 6 o'clock in the evening when those people are actually waking up to give me access to that link. So you got to make sure that everything you do can be used by other people in other locales, in other time zones. And that way you actually back yourself up and you don't actually get these 3 o'clock in the morning calls if you could make that link available to people. The other thing is just setting up your environment, like have your headphones, have like a camera that you look into, and setting up your connectivity. I mean, I had the same thing when I started working before the pandemic at home. It was all good. The connectivity was good enough on my wireless. When everybody in the house started working as well, my wireless connectivity went to shreds. It was just absolutely awful. So I'm now having, I bought like a 10-meter cat cable to connect directly to the wire, to the wired connection again, which I haven't done since 2002, but it's now stable and I'm very happy that it is. So a lot of times you just go back to other ideas and simple tricks to make sure that you are effective in this. And in this course, I'm going through like, how do you get yourself into the mindset? How do you set up your environments for collaboration? And most importantly, I found that with my engineers, when I'm as a program manager, I'm meant to document what they're doing. I'm meant to get people excited, do like videos about it, do documentation about it, do presentations to upper management about it. But a lot of times, these are like local builds on people's computers that need 20,000 flags set up and like different versions of Chromium installed. And I can't do this because I don't have time for that. So just teaching people how to do a screencast of something and doing a voiceover, just talking over it, not for production, but for me to write the documentation and for me to write the presentation about it without me having to interview them about it, made us much more efficient. So a lot of it is also like, how do you set up your machine to record short videos of yourself explaining things? How do you make sure meeting recordings are there for other people to go out there? And how do you organize a meeting so people can contribute, and even later on when there are different time zones, is something that was a big thing. I'm very happy that Microsoft asked me to do that. We had an extra team at the beginning of the pandemic of like people that know how to do that, that did a lot of documentation and videos and intro videos for other people to do it as well, because they realized this is going to be a longer plan. This is going to be for a year, so everybody has to get up to speed on it.
So was it partly motivated from internal experiences with Microsoft and how you've observed other engineers struggle, but partly I've learned a load of these tricks and it's an easy way to share this and we can possibly go public with this rather than just being an internal evangelist thing?
No, I think the Microsoft thing was also it was never meant to be an internal thing. They were just asking me because I've been doing it, and it is to a degree a thing for my own benefit as well, because I have a lot of frustration not getting the information that I need in the time where I could work on it. So I wanted to teach people internally and also externally to make sure to think about people in other time zones. I mean, you remember when we worked at Yahoo together, we had a team in India, one in England, and one in America, and that's why we could deliver something like Yahoo Answers, which now got shut down, that quickly, because basically we had people 24/7 working on it. And how we worked in these 2-hour periods where we had handover, and how we prepared our materials so the next person can hit the ground running, so they're not actually having any questions about it, was something that we learned back then even. And I think that's something that I carried in through that and made sure that we put into this kind of course as well.
So it's a vast amount of experience that you just wanted to share and make sure everyone could find easily as well. It's a really good, interesting topic though, because you mentioned a point around even just the infrastructure at home, the fact you've plugged your laptop into your Ethernet now. I had similar problems with the kids when we're all trying to stream video at the same time. It's like, what can we do? But luckily, Mesh Networks, there was just grab a few nodes, get them set up around the house, and that pretty much solved everything. But I don't think people realise this tech's available, because I was talking to people at work and they were going, oh, I'm in a nightmare. I've got everyone at home, I've got my wife next door, and we can't even find a space to have 2 calls at the same time. These are real problems, though, that need addressing, and no one's really, addressing it.
Well, we're also super geeky. I mean, if you talk to the average Vodafone user or whatever other person, that they get their pre-installed router and like a cable and connect this, and hopefully it works. They never change the password on it. They never looked at the admin interface of it. And I mean, oh my God, I mean, these admin interfaces, how atrocious are they? I mean, none of them resize to a different screen for starters, because they don't have that meta tag in there. And that's like the web interfaces that nobody ever maintains. These are like 1993, and people just made them back then, and we leave it at that. And it's just brutal how much of this infrastructure doesn't get updated as well. Like the firmware and security possibilities there as well, and security attack possibilities are quite scary as well. And I think it's tough because people don't want to think about it. I've said that a few times in talks. People see the internet as like plumbing by now. I open the tap and water comes out. I don't want to know where this water comes from. I complain to an expert if it doesn't come out, and that's about it. And I think the internet has become the same thing, which is ironic, because I didn't have any cold water for the last week for like 8 hours a day. I never had a house before where you only had hot water, not cold water. So that was really bizarre, but now they fixed it as well. I guess if a building is from 1902, you can expect these kind of things to come.
Again, similar legacy problems that never get addressed, right? It's like, how many houses and villages still don't have fiber because they've got copper? They don't need to change it.
Well, especially in America. I mean, Europe, we're still lucky, and it's funny how the newer countries that came later to the market have a much better connectivity. I mean, Romania is like 4G throughout, not 4 gigabit throughout, not 4G mobile. It's just pretty bizarre how these countries that later came into the market got the newest bits, whereas like upgrading the old infrastructure is kind of hard.
It is very strange. I mean, we talked a lot about the motives and, what you were trying to get from the content. Can you tell us a little bit about how you went about making this content as well? Because it's not easy to make a video tutorial. And I'm curious your process of how you went about this.
I'm very happy with, and I mean, you have another question that you talked about me, why Skillshare, and it feels weird to advertise that much, but I think the model that they're doing, which I now did with other people that I'm coaching or public speaking, is doing I'm doing as well, is I wrote an outline and said, like, here's the things that I want to cover. And then when the videographer came to my house and basically had a camera person here with an extra rig and extra lighting, and this flat is basically 3 times the size of my bed. So it was basically, I even had a boom mic, and there's no space for it. It's just bizarre how that worked out. Because normally last time I did it, I flew over to New York, and they have like a whole studio there. And what they do is they take the outline, and then they have an interviewer there that asks you questions about the subject in each of those different sections, and then they cut together when you were the most coherent about it. So it was more like a stream of consciousness talking about the subject matter instead of just having a script to follow. So this was much easier for me, and it's very convenient for me. It's a lot of work for the editors and for the people cutting it together at the end. And you see some of the cuts are harsh, but they're actually much better than I would do with my own cutting. So I think in this case, partnering with somebody like that who actually approaches it like that was very easy to do. When I do own video courses, I basically give myself a script, and I have some course about this, but I can't remember where I actually said it. Oh yeah, it's in the new version of the developer advocacy book. What I learned as well is actually doing screencasts of the things that I want to do, and then doing my own voiceover over these screencasts, because I found talking and typing things in and doing the screencast at the same time, one of the 3 always fails. And it's normally not your fault. It's some connectivity issue or some notification popping in or Windows wanting to update halfway through your recording. And what I start with when I do a screencast-based kind of course is I script the screencast. I say, like, okay, you go there and you actually click this button to do that, and you type in that and you do that, which is great because I can reuse that transcript for documentation later on as well. Like half of the Edge developer documentation that you see right now was basically scripts for screen recordings. Then I do the screen recording just by having that script on one screen and clicking around the software in the other one. And then I put them together, and then I just do a screen recording over it. I kind of read out the script, but I also make it much more natural that way, because there's nothing worse than just people sticking to a very, very scripted kind of presentation. I always hate these, like, we're incredibly excited about these new opportunities that our product gives you. And you're like, God, have you swallowed somebody from QVC at 3 a.m? It's just like, it's more like then going through the script and explaining, like, oh, I'm going over there and click on that, and then you see that this happens. And you only have time to do that when you don't do the clicking. And I think that's the learning how to get your audio and your video and your script as 3 different things together, and then putting it together in software, in like video editing software, is a very, very important step that way. Then again, I mean, it depends what you want to do. If you want to do a proper training course that's using the Lyndas and these kind of in the worlds, like the more like educational things that's going through enterprise customers, fine. If you go to TikTok or you go to Twitch, people expect things to be live and go wrong all the time. I think it's more like, I have a hard time talking about it because I don't understand it. I don't understand how you have like a Twitch recording of 3.5 hours, people talk about CSS Grid, and people watch that, and you're like, they can't watch the whole thing. They're going in and out, don't they? Like, and when I did some live presentations on these platforms, it completely freaked me out seeing people signing in and signing off and just bringing in the same question 15 times. And I guess it's a different world. I just got approached by TikTok as well if I want to do something with them, and I have no idea what that's going to be. But the market is huge, so why not? You know, it's going to be interesting to see. And I mean, ByteDance directly contacted me, so I don't know what they want from me. But again, it was through the Skillshare materials. They saw on Skillshare what I've been doing, and they're like, okay, cool. An interesting thing is that there's a lot of predators in that market as well. Like, you know, I get daily emails about like 2-year-old Skillshare courses. Oh, you can also upload that to our platform and we give you money for it. And I'm like, well, but Skillshare paid me to record this. This is, I mean, it's my content, copyright, but it's not my content to redistribute. So there's a lot of people who think like an education platform is just putting up videos from other people and putting ads on it and making money with it. And that's kind of worrying how many people I have to say no to every week that think that's a viable business model, actually.
If you need help with your side project, either for inspiration, support, or just general feedback, remember to join our On The Side community on Slack. There are a number of previous guests from the podcast in there, including Sam Hardacre, Mike Street, Dom Hodgson, and Mark Lismore. Pop on over to ontheside.network, which will take you straight through to registration, and I'll see you in there. It's fascinating insights to what you went through to make that, actually. And you mentioned TikTok a couple of times. I noticed Scott Hanselman's also doing like TikTok videos now. I think he's been doing it for a few months. Have you two had a bit of a rivalry going on to try and do something together? Or
I like him. He's a great guy, but he just jumps on anything new and nails it. So it's interesting. It's really hard to compete with him in this case. And he's been doing his podcast for years as well. So he's been very much like 100% doing that. And yeah, I mean, I don't use TikTok. I don't have time in my day for it. So I wasn't that excited about thinking about it. Otherwise I would have started it as well. He's very good in like taking things on. I also feel like, I mean, maybe it's just a bias that I have, that I'm this old white dude that is on TikTok that feels weird, where everything else is like 14, 12, 13-year-olds talking about things on there. So it kind of feels, I don't know, if people want it, I do it, but I didn't start my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is also a total mess either. So the whole it's odd. I'm a writer and at heart, and I worked in radio. So audio to me is like something super intrusive. Like when I hear audio, I want to concentrate 100% on it. And I learned by listening to things as well. And for example, when I see like whatever, what's it called, Class thing, all the audio social platforms that come on right now, where just people talk to each other. And I'm like, we called this phone calls. We had that before. This is like, and I cannot be on a phone call and put the phone to the side and not give a crap about what people say the next 5 minutes. It just feels like a very intrusive thing to me, but it seems to be a generational thing. I get from my niece and nephews, I get like WhatsApp messages that are just an audio recording of 7 minutes. And I'm like, you know how much I charge for the hour? How much 7 minutes of my time is worth during the day? Like, and it's like 2 minutes of information. And I'm like, if you want to have a call, just call me and we can chat, but don't make me listen to 7 minutes of your waffling. That's just bizarre.
There is a very strange generation shift, though, I think, with all tech, not just in audio. But I've noticed this myself. I think my mother-in-law sent me a voice message when she lives next door. She could have just come around.
Could have shouted.
Exactly. Just get the old bean cans with a string would have done the job. But I think there's something in it, the fact that this new generation of engineers will probably tap into those new ways of living and lifestyles rather than learning. I mean, me and you, we come from a different generation, right? You say you come from that radio background and writing background. I don't think people have the time and energy to do that anymore. They just want instant content, video content. And I just wonder how things are going to change over the next 5-10 years and how we're going to engage with that generation.
Well, I also wonder about the validity of it. Like, how do you validate the quality of it? How do you make sure this is not fake news? This is not some QAnon crap. This is like, how do you know? I mean, seeing the YouTube, how YouTube got gamed with videos for kids with like really outrageous material, and now every time you upload a video for YouTube, you have to say no, it's not made for kids, and because of that, it's just a very like automatically generated videos using ML with like different like characters that are important right now, and horrible and fascistic messages and all kind of stuff going on there. So I think the quality of that one is an interesting one as well. Maybe it's just an age thing. I mean, I remember when people said like, oh, when people didn't play electric guitar anymore, when everything was a synthesizer, that's the end of music. And they proved them wrong, because this was like a 20-year cycle. And then like Nirvana came around, it was people playing guitars again. Like, it's like, maybe it's something that people get tired of quickly as well. But I always feel like the immediacy market, like the live streaming stuff, the long-livedness of it is the interesting bit. Like, how long will it be around, or is it just a quick cash grab to make it possible for people to make a lot of money with, like, showing off things? I love that the legality of it. That when you're, for example, a YouTuber and you have sponsored content, you have to say that this is sponsored, that you're actually having these headphones because they paid you to have these headphones, which we don't have on television and not in movies. When you see the money that came in through movies, when they always say like, okay, I'm a big movie buff, so that might take some time. When you see like how much money the movie made at the box office and how much money the movie made in foreign markets, there's never anything in that equation how much that movie made with like product placement. And when you see like James Bond movies and they just obviously say like, I'm driving past this BMW with like Budweiser bottles on top, you know that somebody paid for these two words, but you never see that. And that's always quite interesting when people say that piracy killed the film industry. You're like, well, maybe more transparency would have been interesting as well.
Totally. I mean, we've talked a lot about the the video you've created and all the work you've been through and the process you went through. Were there any serious challenges you kind of came across as you went into that process as well, and even finding the time to make it amongst your day job?
Yeah, that was kind of tricky, and I took days off for it. I have to admit, and I mean, I think that's just a fair thing to your employer. If you're not an advocate, a developer advocate in your company, and you do something on the side, I think that's your thing to do. I was also lucky to be able to reuse a lot of the stuff, reuse a lot of the research that I had to do for that course inside materials inside the company, either for training purposes or for documentation purposes. So that was also another thing where I mean, the employer was not against it at all. They're actually, most employers nowadays will be happy if you become successful somewhere publicly as an expert in working or in just setting up development environments. That's great because it reflects great on your company as well, unless you use other competitors' products in them or something. But I think the find the time was like, yeah, I took days off to actually do it. But then again, with not being able to travel, I guess we all had a lot of days accrued anyways nowadays that get there.
Very true.
That's a shocking thing to compare with America and us in Europe, like how much we in work contracts in Europe by law, how many days off we're supposed to have and how many days off Americans supposed to have. And then you wonder, I mean, they have higher salaries, but that's kind of the reason as well.
Is there a significant difference then between the US and the Europe?
Oh yeah, definitely, and especially in the salaries. But then again, we also have like social health care, and we have like free schools and free universities that you have to pay a lot of money for in America. So of course, people have to get paid more. But again, I was shocked to see how forward thinking Microsoft was in this. And I don't want to sound like a fanboy. It's just a very thing that I thought was incredible, that we got an extra 5 days of free mental health care days because of the pandemic. Where they said, like, we know you all have your kids at home. It's a much more cramped. It's much more problematic. So you get an extra few health days that you can take off when you need to. And I think that was like a very generous offer that a lot of companies should have thought about it. Then again, when I talked to my fiance, who's like a teacher, health pedagogue, it's called, basically working with people with mental problems and also with like disabilities. So she's working with people with schizophrenia, with like all kind of anxiety issues and these kind of things. And she's just looking at me like with eyes like, wait, you work on a computer and you type in things to a machine. How do you need extra days off? Like, what's going on there? And I'm like, yeah, it is like, it feels weird that we already in the high grossing market of income and convenience of work get all these extra benefits. But then again, somebody some time ago fought for these benefits, and it would be bad not to use them, and it would be bad not to actually take advantage of them either. So I think that's something that we always should consider, that like having the privilege we have in our market, and we still have to keep our companies human. And I think it's great if it comes automatically, but it's also great if you start demanding this, because we are in a system of power right now.
It's fascinating. I mean, there's a lot of comparisons to what we do now in ASOS as well. We've got a wellbeing day coming up on the end of the month. They're just giving everyone the last Friday of the month off to do what you want, mental health, wellbeing. But again, we're also doing surveys with the employees to find out what their problems are. And again, all this year is all about I'm worried about going back to the office. I've adjusted to working from home now. How are we going to maintain this going forward? And so they are hearing that staff have changed in the way that they work, and they've continued to deliver. It's not like you've sat there doing nothing and struggle. We were lucky that we were enabled to do this stuff remotely. But like you, my wife's a teacher. She looks at me with glaring eyes going, what do you need a day off for? I'm a teacher in a secondary school for never stop. I don't even get my holidays anymore because of lockdown. I know I wish we could gift it you, but unfortunately it's not how it works,
I just hope that a lot of people got a lot more humble about what teachers really do, having their kids at home and having to deal with them 24/7. It's that people are like used to having that freedom to work from home, and still, as you said, if the efficiency was the same, and I would argue that probably the efficiency was higher in some people as well, if they do the time changing, that people are in different time zones and work on different times of the day on the project. If you use that to your advantage, you become much more effective as a company. I've been a big believer in like working from home for quite a while, and it's good to see how many people are like, why exactly do you want us back in the office so you can micromanage us again and sit next to us, or why is that a thing? I also liked how we went about, like, for example, when the offices were empty. And I mean, Microsoft, this is huge. We got like 72 buildings in Redmond, just us. And it was like, okay, how do we set up your home environment and like getting a proper office chair? So we got to get like a proper office chair, but people who lived next to offices were basically said, like, you can come to the office and pick up a chair and take it home. And because we're not going to use it in the time, you're not coming to the office anyway, so you take the chair home and use it there. And in the office, we got these ergonomic specialists coming around and looking at your workplace, if it's actually healthy to work that way. So we couldn't do this. So we actually made sure that people have an opportunity to work in an environment that actually makes sense.
Cool. I mean, yeah, I'm glad they're doing that. Right, a couple more things. What are the plans for the future with the course content? Have you got other ideas in the works?
They asked me to do something more July, August yet. I don't know yet what that's going to be, but I think I'm going to be doing something more granular about the working together, like organizing meetings kind of thing, organizing meetings across different time zones and these kind of environments. That might be something to do. And maybe going more into detail about like how to document things, how to make your code very documentable for other people and also promotable for other people, going back into the evangelism thing. But I don't know what they want yet. It's kind of bizarre. I also got a few other blog publishers asking me to write for them, and then they send you an Excel sheet of what to write about, and it's all frameworks.
Oh, really?
It's like, we want React, we want Vue, we want this. And I'm like, well, then ask somebody who uses it, because that's not me. But they like, it's very interesting how some people have this long-term thinking about their educational content, like how do we get people to work better with each other? And others are like, we need some bang for the buck immediately, kind of like quick thing to document, to get like what's cool right now, where do you go with that? So I'm not sure. I mean, I also have a lot of stuff coming up my way in my job right now, so I don't know if I actually can do a lot more courses, but I also have a lot of talented people working with me that I want to keep prodding and mentoring and coaching right now, so they could do something in my stead as well and get some money out of it as well if they wanted to. So that's not a bad thing. So it's great when you're in a position where a lot of people want things from you, and you can then triage them out to other people, and they also trust your judgment, that you actually give them somebody who actually can deliver the same level that you can. And yeah, I mean, looking at the course now, I'm my own worst critic. I'm like, oh God, why did I say that again, kind of thing. But everybody does that. So that's there's no immediate plans to do some more out of that one. But I also where I've been horrible in the past, the Skillshare platform is more like a class environment where you actually have to interact more with that, and you have to promote the thing yourself and keep the promotion going. And I hate doing self-promotion of these things, so it's kind of tough to actually do that. But we'll see how well it's actually received right now, and if follow-up courses like that make sense.
That's cool. We'll make sure that the details are in the show notes so people can click through and try it out. I think it's a 7-day trial or 14-day trial with Skillshare.
It's a 7-day trial, and the first introductory videos are always open, and and it's actually a good deal. I mean, the really materials, good. the other courses I've done there are incredible as well. So.
I mean, I did yours in a lunch hour. It was brilliant. It's half an hour, really straightforward to go through, and some really nice little nuggets of information you can take away. Because I think, like you, I do a lot of this stuff anyway, but the little details, I like the way he's positioned the camera or whatever it was, the way that he's staggered his screen so you can actually see up rather than left to right and all this sort of stuff. But it's really good. And your final point about getting your people to contribute content is something I'm really keen to explore as an engineering manager now, is rather than being the person to do it, delegate and trust and coach and mentor them to be able to do that. Because a lot of people are reluctant to come out of their shell and share what they know, but they give them a platform of potential. They're actually really strong and good in that area. You just need a little bit of a nudge occasionally.
Yeah, the big one was like giving lightning talks in the office, allow people to give like a 5-minute talk, 5-minute discussion, 5-minute, should we make this a best practice every Thursday before lunch, like we did in Yahoo back then. That actually got a lot of people out of their shell. I also now started making the materials that I'm doing, documenting them heavily in notes, like a PowerPoint, for example, giving like notes how to present that slide, giving notes to what to point out in that screencast, and then actually giving it out to people for translation. I'm very lucky that my team has 22 nationalities in it. Wow. And a lot of them were my English is so bad, and I'm like, yeah, but your Spanish is amazing. How about we do you do that presentation in Spanish, and we give it out to the Argentinian and to the Spanish and to the South American market? And they're like, yeah, that's an idea. So it's very exciting to see that kind of opportunities that you didn't have before. And when I moved back to Germany, I started doing things in German again, which is atrocious because they have specialist terms for everything that I didn't know because I lived for 16 years in England. So I'm just beating around the bush when I want to say one specialist term that everybody uses here. It's quite hilarious to see.
What a shift. Last one for you then. Have you got any pro tips that you can one pro tip on how people can work better remotely?
I think the biggest pro tip I have is 2 screens. And that sounds weird because it costs money and it's a thing, but it could be a shitty screen in the background, an old CRT or like an amber or a green screen from 1952. It doesn't matter. The main reason is that most conference call systems are great because you can actually see the presentation and you can see the chat maybe. But then when you present something or when you code along with somebody doing a live sharing thing, there's not enough screen for that most of the time. So I'm normally using my computer here, my laptop, to do my to do my coding and what I want to show. And I use the second screen in the back where I actually look directly into the camera and have my chat system running to actually talk directly to people. So that way you're not really having this problem where your clickety-clacky keyboard is actually in the way of your presentation, and you actually can go between the okay, now I'm listening and now I'm showing you something. Now I'm listening, now I'm showing you something. And a lot of chat systems, sadly enough, are still set up that you cannot see when people put up their hands when you're doing a full screen presentation. So having one screen for a full screen presentation and the chat system for everything else is really, really a great opportunity to be more effective in meetings.
I completely vouch for that as well. And to be fair, you mentioned they're quite expensive. You can get them really cheap. And a lot of companies are actually subsidizing this at the moment. I think Microsoft, you mentioned, are doing this. I know a lot of companies I've been through are doing the same. And I think there's even a government initiative in the UK that helps give you tech and give you money back on home working facilities as well. So it's worth looking down that avenue.
And a lot of companies don't need their offices right now, or now it's starting again. But during the lockdown, you were allowed to take your screens from the office home as well if you wanted to. So
sure. So good tip. I like it. Pro tip from Chris. So we'll give you details for the Skillshare on the show notes. How can people get hold of you and catch up and chat with you?
Well, christianheilmann.com is my blog. Everything is linked there. It's CodePoet on Twitter is the easiest to get a quick hello. And yeah, it's chris@christianheilmann.com as email, which is quite interesting as well.
Yeah.
That was another quick pro tip. During lockdown, you always had to fill in papers when you went to some restaurant or something like that. They always ask you to sign that you were there.
Yep.
I got myself a little rubber stamp with my address, my telephone number, and my email. And every time they gave me one of those things to fill out, I just went in because my handwriting is unreadable. And this was basically a much, much better way. And the facial expression of people seeing that every single time I did this, they were just like, oh my God, I would have loved to think of that. It was just a very simple way to fill out these things.
I love it. That's a great tip. I love that. Brilliant. Well, thanks for joining us, Chris. It's been wonderful to catch up with you and hear about your stories and everything. We will be in touch again soon, I hope, and we can catch up on the next lot of content that you get out there.
Yeah, I also love the rest of the people that you already announced that you're recording right now. There's lots of interesting stuff coming your way in this podcast. I really enjoyed that.
I appreciate that. Yeah, we're trying to keep it variety, so it's not just all about tech and all that. We've got some meetups, we've got some, UX and even recruitment side of things as well. So it's a real mix of stuff from what we do in our lives.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Good man. Yeah. Appreciate you joining.
Okay, see you soon.
Huge thanks to Chris for joining me this week to talk about his home setup, the Skillshare training material, and his plans for the future. I hope you learned as much as I did from the chat. Let us know if you have any other suggestions or would like to find out more. You can tweet Chris at CodePoet, that's CODEPO 8 on Twitter, or email chris@chrisheilmann.com. And remember to check out his Skillshare course. Link details are in the show notes. As for the podcast, we obviously love to hear your thoughts. Get in touch on all the socials, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, as @MakeLifeWorkPod. You can always email hello@makelifeworkpodcast.com. And you can obviously visit the website makelifeworkpodcast.com for all the show notes and archives. And remember to rate and review us in your favourite podcast app. I'll be back next time with someone else to talk about balancing their side projects on the Make Life Work podcast.